Welcome back. You are watching Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. Early on, we were talking about the current situation as we enter the phase 3 of MCO, of the very fact that we need to keep people compliant with the MCO. But there's a reason why people are not compliant with the MCO. Many reasons, of course. Primarily is because they want to go to work. This is the question where we want to ask ourselves, how common is it for Malaysians to work from home? And this question was asked frequent enough to a point where Khazanah Research Institute has done a paper on it. In fact, the paper that KRI did was literally entitled, How Common is Working from Home? So joining me over the phone is the researcher at KRI, Siti Tumin, to talk to us at length about her paper. Siti, let's understand a little bit about the motivation of you doing up the paper. What motivated you to do the paper?
So because of the MCO, a lot of people were told to work from home, and for me personally, I am just curious about the kind of occupations, jobs, sectors that can actually work from home. And last week itself, DOS, Department of Statistics, published an initial survey report on the effects of COVID-19 on individuals and the economy. And there are some indicators there on how many people actually had to work from home because of the crisis. So I thought it's a very useful snapshot of how workers manage their work life given restriction movement order and the kind of challenges that they have to face because of the pandemic. So that's why I look into this a little bit deeper.
Okay, I understand. Let's talk about some of the assumptions that you used in making it into this particular research paper. What were the assumptions made when you prepared the paper?
Based on DOS's study, there are several limitations there, particularly in terms of whether it's a representative findings or not, and arguably it's not. It's based on selective sampling, but I think even with this limitation, the findings are very helpful in order for us to understand the effects of COVID-19. I also applied some findings based on the United States on looking at how many jobs can actually telework. Basically, it means that you can work with the assistance of ICT and you need not be at the workplace itself. So you can do these kinds of work at home. And assuming that the kinds of jobs that can telework in the US is the same with Malaysia, quite limited assumptions, but assuming that I try to kind of estimate the sort of jobs that can be conducted from home, and given these assumptions, I found that actually not many workers in the country can work from home. It's simply not a viable option for a lot of workers. If we look at particular sectors, particular kind of jobs, especially mid-skill and low-skill jobs, these workers can't simply just continue as usual by working at home.
Now, it's interesting that you said that working from home is not common in Malaysia. So how do we move about from this? What will be the new normal for Malaysians, particularly when we want to talk about working from home? Largely because in your paper, one of the summaries you wrote was about those that are in critical sectors that might not be able to work from home efficiently. In fact, if I were to quote you, working from home is uncommon among Malaysians, most vulnerable workers, the self-employed. So let's talk about the self-employed right now. How are they going to move forward and acclimatize themselves with the new normal?
Yes, certainly. I think, if anything, the first round of findings indicate the sort of vulnerabilities that the self-employed face. Only 25% of them can work from home. Close to half of them actually lost their jobs. And you can also identify the kind of security in a way that more standard workers face, because the findings found that more standard workers, like people who earn regular salary from their employment, half of them can actually work from home. And if you are, employed by GLCs or MNCs, the prevalence of you to work from home is more likely. And even what I'm discussing here is just the changing work arrangement that the self-employed have to face. other areas of vulnerabilities as well was quite evident from the findings by DOS. So if you think about their income, more than 90% of them said that their incomes were affected because of COVID-19. Lots of them lost their job, they don't have enough savings. So when we find findings like this, I think it's really important to understand firstly the sort of vulnerabilities that the self-employed face in the labor market. And my colleagues at KRI, actually, several of them have commented on how we think about vulnerabilities of the self-employed. Even with current assistance from Bantuan Prihatin, even that might not be sufficient for them over a longer period of time, especially if we think that the MCO might be extended, or actually it is extended, and thinking of like the effects even after the MCO is lifted. If the markets, if economy does not resume back to normal, the self-employed particularly are very, very vulnerable during these tough times.
Now, it seems that what you're trying to address here is the societal change. It's not just economical change or economic changes or whatever. It's actually asking society to think more about working from home. You need men who need to go about doing more domestic chores. You need men to shoulder the responsibility for caring and rearing their children. You need men to actually put down their shoes and put down their foot and say, you know what, let's work on this together, because domestic issues is no longer the issue of the mom, it's actually the issue of the parents right now. And that's of course with the parents, right? I mean, that's of course with couples that have man-woman relationship kind of thing, very traditional kind of way. What about non-traditional families? What about single parents? How are they going to cope? What's the new normal for them?
I think when we discuss about current pandemic, the need to actually make sure that we contain the virus, it's important to think of it. Yes, it's likely the kind of working arrangement that most people would want to. Even if the MCO is lifted, I would imagine some people might not want to go out because you want to protect yourself from being getting infected with the virus. But more importantly, I think it's not a matter of individual choice per se. Firstly, you have to think of the nature of jobs. Some jobs just simply can't be done from home. If we talk about professionals, people who work in ICT, in finance, in more high-skilled jobs, yes, you probably can work from home. But for the rest of the economy, you simply can't. It's tied to the nature of work itself. And if you can't do that, then it's likely your employment would be at risk. But I guess the next step is among people who can work from home. I think the next question is to really look and think about whether we have the capacity to support workers to work from home. So in my paper, I briefly touched on how, full access to computers, full usage of computer and internet is actually very specific to certain sectors, like your finance, your ICT sectors, real estate sectors. Now these are high value, well paid sectors. But in other sectors, there are still establishments that don't have computer access or internet access. And even if they do have access, it's not necessarily mobile, so that workers can just shift from workplace to home-based work. And I think when we talk about new normal being one that is defined by home-based work, I slightly worry a bit because for me personally, I think there needs to be quite an important distinction between home-based activities and work-based activities, because there are a lot of considerations here, especially if you think, for example, in terms of workplace safety. How usually it's related and tied to an employer for you to make sure that your workplace is safe and whatnot. If it's becoming home-based, it's simply shifting the burden of taking safety in how you do your work to the workers, and I think that's a bit unfair. If you also think about how this affects women, for example, from previous studies by other colleagues at KRI, we know that women face not only the burden of being in the labor market, some of them, but also if they are in the labor market, they also face other household-related responsibilities in terms of having to do domestic work, having to care for their family, and just imagine the kind of stress that you put on women in this case to manage work and household related activities um, in a time where the lines between work and home is getting blurred if we kind of further encourage work from home. And the third thing I think to worry about is also when we think about the consequences of actually having more work to be home based. For some people maybe it's something that they can manage, but I also worry if this can induce things like mental health issues, things like not being able to separate professional and personal life. These are, I think, real consequences that people will experience if we completely shift work from offices or any kind of workplace, to be honest, to home. And I think it's interesting to see how, a lot of observations on the MCO, when we talk about men needing some guidance on how to shop at the grocery, men needing guidance on how to do very, very basic tasks that actually a lot of women already know. I think on one hand, some people kind of joke about it, but I think on the other hand, we need to really seriously have this discussion on, hey, what you've lived in a particular household for how many years, and it's only now that you need to care about these things. I think slowly, surely, we need to really shift back the conversation from it being a very funny remark about how men need a bit of guidance and really seriously think about actually this is a limitation in how we understand household division of labor in the household, and moving forward post MCO, it's timely to think that it needs to be a bit more equal. And in terms of, yes, I agree, single households, single mothers, single parent families have it a lot worse. And in these instances, I think it's really important to also kind of tap into a much larger networks of not just immediate family, but probably a bit more community-centric way of looking at how we care for people in this country.
Okay, thanks very much, Siti. That was Siti Aiysyah Tumin of KRI joining us to talk about the paper that was published by KRI, Khazanah Research Institute, which is entitled "How Common is Working from Home, and perhaps how do we need to rethink ourselves to the new normal about working from home moving forward." There are plenty of interviews such as this that you can find on Astro. Just search for Astro AWANI, look for Notepad over there. Plenty of interviews like this that you can be found there. Also, I want to learn more about what you think, how you are going to acclimatize yourself moving forward. More social distancing, more reliant on the internet, more, I guess, social, what do you call that, more ability for you to work from home. Well, what's the story for you moving forward, acclimatizing yourself with this new normal that we speak of? Let me know what you think. Just hit us up on Astro AWANI Twitter feed, or you can directly reach out to me at Ibrahim Sani and tell me your stories there. You can also watch these kind of interviews on the mobile devices that you are currently carrying in your phones, in your pockets, and in your hands. Just download the Astro AWANI app wherever you get the application. Until next time, thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.